This is the Blood Red Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
It's the Blood Red Podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along. 4 points off the pace in the race for the top four. Liverpool heads to Manchester United as Klopp looks to stop his Old Trafford wait for a win. Coming up, we'll get into the Reds' fading Champions League qualification hopes. Injury latest on Matip, Van Dijk, Gomez and Henderson. Plus, we'll bring you our usual team selector and match predictions. Here to get into all of that, our Liverpool correspondent Paul Gorst, chief LFC writer Ian Doyle and David Lynch. Guys, I hope you're all well. Gorsty, I'll come to you first. I've had a couple of weeks off. Don't think I missed much in the time I was away, or was that about a Super League? But anyway, following that, it's been a relatively quiet week for the Reds.
It has. Probably not a bad thing, really, when you think of all the hullabaloo that followed the Super League round for an incredible 48 hours and then continued to linger. It was good to see people starting to get back to the normal, actual nuts and bolts of football, wasn't it? You know, the actual sports that used to be okay, but this season has been pretty terrible. So it's a bit of a humdrum week, really, which is crazy when you think that Liverpool are heading to Old Trafford on Sunday afternoon. Normally a game that is built up more than any other. The two most successful sides in Britain, biggest clubs, two of the biggest clubs in the world, going head to head, and it doesn't really feel like it, does it? Because Liverpool, bit of an outside chance at top four, probably gone now, hasn't it, with the draw at Newcastle last week. United more than one eye now on the Europa League, and they're pretty much in the final for that, and know that they're unlikely to finish ahead of Manchester City. So it's all a bit, bit sterile, which obviously there'd be no fans in there as well, so that adds to that kind of feeling. So a weird one when you think of how big the game is and how big it should be. The fact that there's not too much build-up going on at the moment, but that has been a symptom of Liverpool's season that they will be desperate to hear the final whistle for in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say, Doyle, as Gorsty says, Manchester United v Liverpool, there's normally such a buzz around this fixture. I suppose for this one, there's not even so much as a hum, is there? It doesn't seem to feel as though that it is this game that we've got upon us.
How is that different to any game that's happened this season, really? How is it any different to any game, no matter who's playing? It's just the same nothingness, the same vacuum of nonsense that now awaits us. Yeah. See, I thought Gorsty was quite...
view from Ian Doyle.
Yeah. I thought Gorsty was quite downbeat, so I thought, hang on, he's challenging me here, so I'll have to wrap it up a little bit. No, I'll be honest, I'm actually quite looking forward to it. Quite looking forward to seeing Pandemic FC in action again. Because I think if there's one team that's benefited most from nobody being there to put them any kind of psychological or mental pressure, it's Manchester United, which we have spoken about this loads of times, haven't I? If they've had any sense, they would have won this league easily. United, it was the chance, and they've blown it. And you're laughing, Lynchy, but we had this conversation in October, November, and you all laughed at me and said, "Oh, United are rubbish. They've got no chance of winning the league." Well, hang on, look who's second, and he's going to finish second. The only team that can stop Man City still. It's them. City were always going to win the league, but if United were going to win it, it was this season. I just think they've completely blown it. And you also have to bear in mind, they might win the Europa League. Why are they in the Europa League? Because they're rubbish in the Champions League. They got knocked out by a Leipzig team that Liverpool beat 2-0 home. Well, in Budapest, home and away. And this is a Liverpool team that, let's be honest, has been absolutely rubbish since in 2021. So, and Leipzig are... I think I'm right in saying that they're second in the Bundesliga, and Bayern Munich lost at the weekend, did they? So I'm not sure whether Leipzig won or not. But the point being there that, I know it's easy to say this is a nothing game. I actually don't think it is. I think Liverpool still think they've got a chance of getting into the top four, and they won't give it up. I also think United will not want to lose the league by getting beat by Liverpool. So I think this could be quite a tasty one, because I think there'll be a few scores to settle. I think Liverpool were a bit unlucky to lose the FA Cup game, weren't they, back in January? Me and Paul were there for that one. I mean, the 0-0 against United at Anfield, that underlined why United aren't going to win the league, because they were too scared to even have a go, and that was kind of the start of the first time we really saw of Liverpool. Hang on, what's going on here? This isn't quite going to plan. So I think there'll be a little bit of edge to it, even if there's nobody there. But yeah, that's I just think, who cares?
Yeah, fair enough. All right, yeah, catch you next week on the. No, I'm joking.
I don't mean who cares in the sense of who's bothered, but more in the sense of we've just been doing this all season, haven't we? I genuinely do think there's a bit more on this game than the previous commentators, yourself, Guy, and Paul have actually made out. I actually think this is quite an important game.
What do you make of it, Lynchy? How important would you say it is?
I don't know, because usually in this situation, I think you'd say for Liverpool, there's nothing really riding on it, because I think even if they win this, I still think top four's out of the reach. They just haven't been good enough and put together consistent runs of results enough. So from Liverpool's perspective, you'd probably be saying, okay, well, if they can't get top four this season, this is a big chance to make a statement. Okay, we'll be better next season. They use it as a springboard towards next season. But I don't really even think it's that, because I think Liverpool's failings are going to be there to be seen again. I think they're going to have the same issues they've had since half of the centre halves knocked off, or more than that, 3/4 of the centre half options knocked off injured. Those issues are still going to be there, and even if they get a win, I don't think they can use it in any way, because the team's going to be sort of composed slightly differently next season. It's, I think there's going to be changes there, and so I'm not sure it's useful to Liverpool in that sense. And obviously for Manchester United, it's not useful because they're never going to close that gap. They aren't going to win the league. They aren't good enough. So there's that. So it's, I don't think there's an awful lot riding on it for either side personally. And I just think it's one from Liverpool's perspective where they'll just be thinking, okay, we know we've got problems this season. We've got injuries and we're not going to be back to our best. Just try and get out of there without a defeat and try and put in as good a performance as possible, because they've been dreadful at Old Trafford down the years. Even when they've gone there absolutely flying, they haven't done themselves anywhere near justice. So I think that's probably the main aim. But I don't think in the long term the result will matter too much, which is probably a good thing for Liverpool, because I don't hold out a lot of hope for them, to be honest, this weekend.
No, Doyle, I'll just come back to you sort of on how important the game is and things. And you're saying there this scores to settle and things. I think it's 6 visits to Old Trafford for Klopp yet to win. Is that more what it is, that individual basis? Or do you think they've still got a chance at the top 4? Because they're 8 points off Leicester City with 5 games to go and 4 points off Chelsea. They've only sort of been able to string 3 wins in a row together. That's been the best run of the season that they've had, obviously recently before the 2 draws and the first 3 games of the season. So do you think top 4 is still a realistic option?
Well, let's put it this way. In the last couple of weeks, Chelsea got beat 5-2 at home by West Brom. West Ham got beat at Newcastle. Tottenham just were Tottenham. And you've seen Everton can't really do anything at the moment, really, in terms of actually getting consistent wins, although they did beat Arsenal. That's not too hard, is it? Let's be honest. But yeah, I think I actually do think they do, but they'd have to win this game. They have to win. Simple as that. I mean, I'm not sure whether or not everyone remembers this, but back in 2004, kind of the same kind of scenario. Liverpool were kind of outside the top 4 and things weren't looking great. And then they went to Old Trafford towards the end of the season and won 1-0. I think I'm pretty sure it was a penalty. And they ended up somehow scraping into the top 4. I mean, I think they're in a worse situation now than they were then going into that game, but there was the same kind of feeling like, oh, we've got United now and we never win there, even though they'd won the last couple of seasons beforehand, I think. So I do think it's not all over yet, but I do think they have to win at United. And if they don't, it would take some really, really weird things happening for Liverpool to get into the top 4. And as Klopp said after the Newcastle game, if they don't get there, it's their own fault. They don't deserve it.
Yeah, Gorst, it's sort of a rock and a hard place for Liverpool, isn't it, going to Old Trafford as well? Because if they win, they could effectively, well, more than likely will hand Manchester City the title, albeit Liverpool haven't been able to win it for weeks. And obviously, if they lose, that definitely will be the sort of final nail in the coffin for finishing in the top 4.
Yeah, I agree with Lynchy there when he says that Liverpool haven't done themselves justice at Old Trafford when they've gone there in better form and in better shape than they will on Sunday. I think back to last season when I think it was maybe the 9th game of the season, Liverpool had won every single game beforehand and United were in a bit of a state of flux as they seem to have been for so long, within maybe the last 6 months or so. And Liverpool froze really on that day and needed a last-minute equaliser from Adam Lallana to save them a point. And this Liverpool team on Sunday is nowhere near as good as the one that was playing 18 months ago. It's not even as good as the one that was playing 6 months ago, is it? It's just the faces are the same, but the form is markedly different. And without a win at Old Trafford since 2014, I think, when Luis Suarez and co rocked up and won 3-0. Klopp hasn't won there in half a dozen games, and he thought he had actually. He mentioned it in his press conference today. He said, well, what about the game in Europe? And he was referencing obviously the Europa League game in 2016 on St. Patrick's Day that was actually drawn, but Liverpool went through. So that was about as close as they've come on the Klopp, and every other time they haven't really got near them. So that has to change if Liverpool have got any chance of finishing in the top four. It's obviously an outside chance now. There are 15 points left to play for, and they could be 7 behind Chelsea by the time they play on Sunday, with Chelsea playing Fulham on Saturday night. So, look, if they're going to do it against all logical comprehension, then they're going to have to win, aren't they? And Klopp's been saying today that they need 5 wins from 5, and they need to rely on 1 or 2 others to slip up as well. So that's going to be what it's going to be, and it's undoubtedly the most difficult game of the run-in. It's probably the most difficult game of any season really for Liverpool, going to Old Trafford. So something needs to change if they are to have any hope of finishing in this top 4.
Lynch, have you any sort of explanation, any reason for why it is Liverpool haven't won at Old Trafford under Jurgen Klopp, or is it a case of sort of having to take each game in sort of isolation as to why that's played out, or do you think it is a sort of psychological barrier that may well be appearing there? Because it's not since the days of David Moyes that Liverpool have won at Old Trafford.
Yeah, well, I think in the early days of his reign, they seemed to sort of perform better there, just in the sense that I think their role in the game was a lot clearer. So they would go there as the underdogs. I think United was slightly better, and even though Liverpool were improving under Jurgen Klopp, United were in a better position at that point. And I think they tended to play better because the brief was so much clearer, which was basically, Jurgen Klopp football at its purest: defend deep and in numbers if you can, and then break at pace and try and press up high if you can. And so I think they found it easier to sort of imprint that game on United, really. And although they didn't get a win in that time, they did play slightly better than they have recently. Whereas now they've been going there, and as Gorst mentioned, going there as favourites and in a lot better nick than United. Going to Old Trafford and being asked to dominate is quite a difficult thing to do, because not a lot of sides do it. And I don't think Liverpool have ever looked quite comfortable with that, really. And I think, the crowd is obviously an influential factor. I think in previous seasons, I think, you go in there and 76,000, it's always a big atmosphere, isn't it, for Liverpool turning up there? And I do think, as much as we can say that Anfield is hugely or makes a huge contribution to Liverpool performances, sometimes I do think that happens. When you go to Old Trafford and you've got that many home fans who don't want you to play well, they can influence you, and I think that happens. So I think it's a combination of those two things: is being the side who go there and look to dominate, and then having all those fans on your back. I think they found it difficult. That might make it slightly easier for them this time, not having the fans there. Maybe Liverpool can go there and they can also play that natural game a little bit more of allowing United maybe to dominate possession and capitalise on their mistakes. That actually might work quite well for Liverpool this time, and hopefully we just see a better performance in the last couple of seasons, because they just haven't been very good there.
Liverpool being rubbish at Old Trafford is nothing new. You got to bear, me being slightly older than the rest of you, even when Liverpool were good in the 80s, they never won at Old Trafford. They didn't win for more than 10 years between 1990 and 2000. And I think this is just off the top of my head. I can only think of 4 wins there in 35, 36 years. That might be wrong, but it can't be many more than that.
Yeah, but I think what was probably most disappointing about it was that Liverpool have been going there in recent seasons and have been the far better side. I think all through the 90s you can say, okay, well, Sir Alex Ferguson was there, Liverpool weren't up to much at all, and so you probably expect them to have that terrible record, but it's the recent ones. Yeah, sorry.
So what about in the 80s? In the 80s, when Liverpool were miles the best team, it was exactly the same then as well. I mean, it just always seems to be a way that Liverpool, they just, United always want to beat Liverpool, basically, and for whatever reason, Liverpool just have never really been able to get to grips with them very often at Old Trafford.
What do you make, though, of the point Lynch made before, Doyle, of the crowd not being there? Manchester United, when they arrived at Anfield in January, seemed to be wearing this sort of unbeaten record they've got away from home as a badge of honour, and really didn't want to seem to lose in that game. All 4 of their Premier League defeats have come at home this season, including against Sheffield United. So if any season, this is the season, no?
Well, you'd think that if Liverpool had half a team, but they've got about a quarter of a team at the moment, depending on, as Gorsty said, even the people who are there aren't really there. So, it's in some ways, it would have been a good time to play them, but I think any kind of advantage that Liverpool may have had from no fans being there has been taken away by the fact that Liverpool's centre backs aren't there and the strikers are there in spirit, kind of thing. So, or in body, I should say, not spirit. So. Yeah, no, I just think, we'll come on to the predictions in a bit, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, Jurgen Klopp was asked that, wasn't he, Gorst, in the press conference, whether this was kind of the ideal time for Liverpool to play Manchester United, sort of the fact that they really do need to go for it. What do you make of that? Is it the ideal time with everything on the line that Liverpool have to be winning these games, that now is the time?
Yeah, I suppose they're just going to have to go for it, aren't they? One way or another, and somehow try and get a tune out of Sadio Mane and Roberto Firmino, and we know Mohamed Salah will be a threat as he has been all season. He's 29 goals for the team who've been struggling for the past, what are we on now, nearly 5 months. Shows you what an incredible campaign he's had. So, it's tough, isn't it? And I agree with the point Doyle was making about United being able to benefit from the fact that they haven't got 70,000 United fans in there at some point, because I think it suits Solskjaer, particularly in these big games, to get his men behind the ball and be stubborn and durable, and just kind of see it out as best he can and try and nick something on the counter. And we saw that in the FA Cup game, to be fair, with the threat of Rashford on that left-hand side. Liverpool were always susceptible to the counter-attack when Alexander-Arnold went forward. And I think that is going to be a big part of the game, that area of the pitch with it Shaw and Rashford up against Salah and Alexander-Arnold. It's kind of, do United hold the nerve and keep Rashford forward, or does Alexander-Arnold stay back a little bit for fear of that counter-attack? And I think that is where the game's going to be won and lost. But I think if Liverpool, as I say, now's as good a time as any to just go for it. Jurgen Klopp always says, let's have a proper go for it, and that is all that Liverpool have got left.
Lynch, I'll come to you with this one. Is it a chance for Trent to put those Trent can't defend sort of shouts to bed? We obviously know what happened at Old Trafford. What was it, 2018? Marcus Rashford turning him inside and out. I suppose if he comes up against him in this one and keeps him quiet, then all of a sudden the narrative gets completely wiped away.
Yeah, I feel for Trent a little bit, and that seems to be a defining moment in his career for a lot of people, particularly those who don't watch Liverpool frequently. I think that perception about his defensive capabilities has really sort of risen from that game where he did get sort of torn apart by Rashford, and I think it's unfortunate because he's come a long way since then, and that's sort of stuck with him despite his improvement. And I think obviously that says a lot about the size of this game typically, and how much focus there is on it, that game is sort of stuck in people's minds so much. So I suppose, I don't think he'll be seeing it as a chance to prove anything, because I think he's proven enough. And I think we had this discussion, didn't we, around the time that he got left out the England squad. He is a capable defender, and he's brilliant at everything else as well. So I don't think he'll be looking at it as a personal chance to prove anything. I just want to see him play well there. I don't, he's another one of the Liverpool players, and most of the squad, like we've mentioned, have not particularly shown themselves in the best light at Old Trafford. So I think him, as much as anyone, they just want to put in a better performance than they have in recent years.
Yeah, certainly. Gorst, just going back to the sort of press conference and mentioned it at the top, Jurgen Klopp was asked about sort of injuries and latest. Obviously, the four mentioned at the top, Van Dijk, Henderson, Gomez and Matip, all back out on the grass, but obviously still some way from returning. It's already with 5 games left of this season, looking ahead towards next, isn't it?
Yeah, and it has been for some time, I think, hasn't it? Henderson's an interesting one, because initially when he had the injury, the noise was that it might be 6 to 8 weeks, and it's coming up to around 8 weeks now. And I think when Liverpool lose on Sunday, it might be a case of them just saying, "Oh, do you know what, Jordan? Just get yourself fit for pre-season. It doesn't really matter now." Klopp's always maintained that he was hopeful of having Van Dijk, Gomez and Matip fit for pre-season, and I think that'll be crucial to Liverpool getting off on the right foot next season if all 3 of those have got a full pre-season schedule behind them, or as close to pre-seasons as you're allowed when you're not allowed to go jet setting and whatever else. I think that'll be crucial for Liverpool next season, having those three to pick from, and obviously having Henderson back as well. But it's a bit of a shame that we're still in April and we're already looking long and lean towards next season to see what can be achieved there, because it's just it's been an awful season, as it, Doyle. You know, me and you, we go to these games and no one in there except that all you can hear is the thud of the ball and the shouts from the bench, and it's just not the same. So hopefully next season is a return to some sort of normality, both on and off the pitch, and go from there, because it's been a year to forget for Liverpool, and it's been a while actually since we've been able to say that. When you think that they had the Europa League final, they were going for the top four, they've had Champions League finals, and then they were going for the leagues, and they obviously won the league last season. So probably since Brendan Rodgers' last full season in charge, that it's been as kind of despondent as it is at the moment, and they're just kind of lurching towards the end. Hopefully that can all turn around with a couple of good results this weekend, but Liverpool really up against that at the moment.
Yeah, hopefully the catalyst can be a win at Old Trafford. But sticking with the press conference, Doyle, and Jurgen Klopp was asked about Champions League qualification and trying to buy players for next season, how important that might well prove to be. Do you think there's much need, though, for a mass overhaul in the transfer window, or is it a case of get these injured players back and all of a sudden you've got sort of that heartbeat of a team that went to 2 Champions League finals and won the Premier League?
Well, the only way they can do an overhaul is by spending money, and I think, as we've seen over the past week, they haven't got any. And it's not just Liverpool; it's all the teams. And of course, if you factor that in, then how on earth is anybody going to move anywhere if no one's got any money? You know, don't want to go back to the Super League, but Real Madrid showed their hand a little bit, so I'm not sure they're going to be buying anybody major anytime soon. So same with Barcelona. So I don't know. I mean, I would expect there's not going to be a big revolution, no overhaul anyway. I don't think that's not Klopp's way of doing things, is it? I mean, he's always had a constant evolution. Funny enough, there was only the season after they won the Champions League that he didn't make any kind of major signings. And look what happened. Liverpool ended up winning the Premier League with 99 points. So that kind of worked. I mean, you forget that they actually spent, not you don't forget, but I think a lot of people don't realise that they actually, in terms of players coming in, they bought the left back, which is what they needed to help Andy Robertson, but he got injured and he's clearly having his own issues getting to grips with Klopp's style of play. They brought in a midfielder, a world-class midfielder who got injured and is having trouble getting to grips with Klopp's style of play. And then you've got a forward who got injured, and fortunately he's slightly better at Klopp's style of play because that's the kind of player he is. But I know Lynch has slight reservations when he plays down the middle in terms of keeping the ball, and that's something that'll have to come. But Liverpool have brought in players over the last 12 months, but they're going to have to bring in 2, maybe 3 more. You're looking at a centre-back. I've not even mentioned Kabak. He could be one that comes in if they make it permanent. They'll probably need a midfielder with Wijnaldum going. They'll need a forward. So, there is business to be done there. But as Jurgen Klopp said, look, if we don't get into the Champions League, it's not going to make much difference because it was going to be really difficult to sign any players anyway. I think he's been fairly straight down the line with this all the way through. And obviously, and I'd completely forgotten about this. You were thinking of, well, Lovren paid for Tsimikas, but Ryan Brewster paid for Thiago, didn't he? I'd forgotten he went for £23 million. So you do wonder which players are going to go. You could say Nat Phillips might go if they've got so many centre backs, and he's probably tripled, quadrupled, quintupled 6 times. Couldn't think of the word for that. His value. On the basis of his performances this season. So but then again, who's going to pay the money for him? This is the thing. It's not just Liverpool, it's all of them. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I think we might see a lot of low moves, a lot of clever moves, like the Jota one with what was it, Lynchy, Gorsty. What did they say? 4 million up front, was it? 4 or 5?
Yeah, that was the way it was structured. Yeah.
And the thing about that is that they'll have to start paying more of that this summer. So other teams will be in that situation. So I am expecting a lot of creativity in the transfer window, but there's not going to be any Mbappe or Haaland or anyone of any kind of 50, 60 million note coming in, presumably most clubs.
At least we got the pessimism back before the end of the.
That's not
podcast.
pessimism.
No, I'm joking. I'm only
realism.
joking. I'm only winding you up.
I've just said they're going to sell quite a few players, and they're going to make signings. What more do people want? They're making signings.
They want Mbappe. They want Haaland. Yeah, that's what they want.
I've hardly really.
I think the interesting thing with Liverpool this summer will be since Redbird come on board, the noises have been. Whoever you're speaking to, it's going to be kind of business as usual. That seems to be the phrase that you're hearing a lot, and it's you look at that and thinking, what does that mean then for Liverpool? Is it business as usual, as in 2019 when they signed Harvey Elliott and Sepp Vandenberg and Adrian on a free transfer, or is it business as usual of 2018 when they brought in Naby Keita, Fabinho, Alisson, and Virgil van Dijk 6 months earlier? So. Quite what business as usual means for Liverpool this summer will be an interesting one, but I think it's going to have to be more on the 2018 side. I don't expect them to go and spend 200 million this summer, but looking at the squad, there's several players whose best days are probably behind them now at Liverpool, and there's still probably saleable assets. So if Liverpool can raise some money for them, on top of what the income will be and the general transfer budget, then Liverpool might have to go and bring in some top quality this summer in more than one area.
Ed's messaged something on YouTube whilst we're recording for those who are listening to us on the podcast channels, but Ed's put Keita has been hopeless, and just thinking, obviously Keita hasn't had sort of the greatest of seasons, Dave, but in terms of someone like him, and Liverpool of course spent an awful lot of money on him, I know it's not anything like what FSG have done before, but would they maybe have to consider losing money on a player but to get some funds in to then go and spend on others and just cut their losses?
Yeah, but I think with Keita, it's an interesting one because he's 2 years out from the end of his contract. So typically, if Liverpool had been happy with what he'd done over the last 3 years, he would obviously be offering him a new one and opening talks over that this summer. The fact that there's no indication whatsoever that that's going to happen sort of tells you that they're biding the time with him, they're seeing how things play out. I think in terms of using him to raise money, I think that's going to be difficult. His fitness record over the last 3 years has just been woeful, really, hasn't it? And in terms of when he has been fit, his performances, there's been some good ones, some not so good ones, really mixed bag. And, I don't think he's lived up to expectations at all or really got close to that. So I think, even though he's 2 years away from his contract and Liverpool would possibly consider taking a hit, I just think it's unrealistic to expect that anyone's going to be coming in with anything close to an acceptable fee, even something that you would consider acceptable within taking a hit on him. He's not a player I look at as someone they can use to raise funds this summer. But I think Michael Edwards would be confident that there are other players he can use. Shaqiri's obviously desperate to go. There's links with Italian clubs coming up recently, and I think it makes sense for everyone for him to move on. There was interest around him last summer, but I think that's finally going to come to something concrete. And again, Liverpool will probably say, okay, we don't have to get 25 million for him this time. Let's be realistic about it. Divock Origi's in a similar position. He's probably going to move on. There's some wages freed up by Wijnaldum's likely move away. So I think there's room for manoeuvre. I think there's some players they can shift and get some money in, and I think they can do enough business. And I think they don't have to do an awful lot for me. I think going into this, obviously, centre halves desperately needed. We've seen that this season. A midfielder's probably likely if Wijnaldum moves on and there is European football being played at Anfield next season. And then obviously, if Origi and Shaqiri do move on, then a forward will probably be needed as well. So I think that's three players they possibly need, but nothing major. They don't need to do huge surgery to the squad. I think it's just bits and pieces like they did last summer, really, which was a player in every part of the pitch. They do that again, I think they'll be sorted. And all the stuff that's come out, since the season's begun and things have started to go really wrong for Liverpool. Some people have written, why wasn't Jurgen Klopp back? It's absolute nonsense. I think nobody said that in the summer, did they? I think Liverpool's business on paper looked absolutely fantastic in terms of what they'd signed. A really promising forward, a world-class central midfielder, and some backup in defence. It just hasn't, things haven't quite worked out for them. I think if they have a similar summer this time, I don't think anyone would be saying, oh, they need this, and this, or the manager hasn't been backed. I think just some small tweaks like last summer, and Liverpool should be in a position with those injured players coming back to challenge for trophies, I think.
Yeah, Ed's got back in touch. Says sorry to Cater in case he was watching. I'm sure he is.
He does watch. He does watch.
Yeah, he's renowned for it.
Yeah, no, I just and to be honest, I didn't really want to single him out. Even thinking of someone like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, of course, £35 million was spent on just whether or not FSG would consider sort of taking a hit on a player. Before we get into the match then itself and get into our team selector and match prediction as well, Gorsty, just something to sort of throw at you. The West Brom game's been rearranged, and it looks as though we are going to get fans in for perhaps the final few games of the season and maybe there for the last game of the season at Anfield.
Yeah, well, there's no coincidence that Liverpool's best performances at Anfield this season have come with the fans inside. Wolves, was it Wolves? It was, wasn't it? Yeah,
Wolves, Spurs,
Tottenham, and West Brom. We won't talk about
and West Brom.
Yeah,
we won't talk about it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to be at the Hawthorns, isn't it? But if there's is it 500 away fans? Is that what the number is? Yeah, I mean it's better than nothing, isn't it? I mean, it might not necessarily be the deciding factor in the game, but it'll be good for the players who haven't had any fans to cheer them on for 5 months now. So it's good, and it's great for those who get the tickets in the ballot to go and see their team in action again ahead of what will hopefully be a return to packed out stadiums in the coming months. Let's hope that continues to be the way forward.
I think it's actually the Burnley game that's got moved. They've moved Burnley to a midweek, which means that's after the May the 17th cut-off. And I've done a piece where if you crunch the numbers, you'd have about 270 Liverpool away fans if they allow away fans in. Because while the government have said, you can have 5% of the capacity for away fans for these final 2 games of the season, the clubs have to agree with it, because obviously, say Liverpool, for example, the last game of the season, Crystal Palace, they're going to get 10,000 in there, but they'd have to give 500 to Palace fans, and it's whether or not the clubs go, well, actually our fans have been cut out, like Crystal Palace fans from Selhurst Park, and they can't go to they want as many basically home fans in as possible. I mean, personally speaking, I can see the arguments both sides, but I think the clubs have to decide over the weekend whether or not they're going to be okay with allowing the away fans in. So there is a possibility that the Liverpool travelling army could have, say, 270 at Burnley on May, I think it's the 18th or 19th. They haven't decided the date. And then you've got 9,500 at the very least at the home game against Crystal Palace. And then, of course, everyone goes, oh, brilliant, football's back, and then the season ends.
Yeah, exactly. The Burnley game initially was scheduled for the 15th, wasn't it? So West Brom's moved behind that, and then I think it will be the 19th, as you say, the Burnley likely to be rearranged. But Lynchy, obviously, it's not been as big an impact as the injuries that the squad has had, but there being no atmosphere and no crowds in sort of the grounds has certainly had an impact, hasn't it, for Liverpool?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, particularly with how tiring this season has been, the moments in games where Liverpool have just looked like they needed that crowd boost to sort of get them over the line, and they just haven't been able to find it. I think about some of the performances from Mane and Firmino. We talked about them a lot and their form and how they've struggled. I just don't see how that would have been the same with supporters, and I just think they've massively needed that energy in a season that sapped so much from them. And it's ruined the spectacle as well. It's like Gorsty said earlier, just listening to the ball being kicked about and shouts of man on and stuff. It's just not as appealing as the roar of the crowd. It's not as interesting to write about. It doesn't even look as good on telly either. And you talk about the Super League proposal. That was one of the things about that they'd seemingly ignored the importance of getting fans in the ground. And yeah, I just think football's poorer for it really. And let's hope that we get to the end of the season and it just never happens again. I think there's nothing really that should stand in the way, fingers crossed, of us having full houses from the start of next season. And what a relief that is, because it's just been dreadful. And I think all of us, every fan, everyone who watches the Premier League will be looking forward to seeing proper fans in and hearing the songs and actual reactions to when the ball just goes wide rather than the guy pressing the button in the studio. So,
normally about 5 seconds late, it's just put down for a goal kick. Ooh.
Yeah. And singing songs about the ref and things like that. So looking forward to all that.
Yeah, no, it will be good. The delayed crowd reactions. You wouldn't want to be on that job, but yeah, it is funny when you do see it. But anyway, let's get into the game then. Let's do our team selector. Gorst, you can kick us off. We'll go with Alisson as the goalkeeper. Back four, what are we saying? Because there's been a bit of a scare around that Phillips, no?
Well, it's more than scary. It doesn't look like he's going to be involved. So that is a bit of a hammer blow to Liverpool, to be honest. That fact alone probably tells you how mad that this season's been. That you've been sweating on the fitness of Nat Phillips. So I don't know what to do, to be honest. I'm really hesitant to play Fabinho at centre back. But
just throw yourself in, Ghosty. Go on, lad. You told me.
Yeah, I'll bring my boots. Ben Davis, is he a thing? Is he alive?
You're telling me there's a chance that Ben Davis can play?
I mean,
he's on the bench last game.
Well, yeah, maybe this is his chance for his debut. I mean, I'd rather have Ben Davis than Reece Williams. And I just don't want Fabinho at the bar. I read your piece, Lynchy, earlier this week about that, and I couldn't agree more. It's just never ever. That is just to, avoid at all costs. Not that he's bad there, but it just takes so much away from him in midfield. So, go on. I'm throwing in Ben Davis alongside Kabak and Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. So that's centre-back partnership number 21 for the season, I think.
Crikey. Doyle, what about yourself?
Alexander-Arnold, Robertson, Kabak, they're all playing. I think it's Reece Williams played at Old Trafford in the FA Cup and he had an absolute nightmare, which wasn't entirely his fault. But that will prey on his mind a little bit, I'd have thought. Although I think the last game he played was Fulham, wasn't it? Is that right? Him and Nat Phillips started the Fulham game and he did okay. I know Fulham won, but he did okay. But I don't know. This would be a difficult one to throw him back in for that. Ben Davis, again, how can we say, Reece Williams can't throw him in and then put Ben Davis in for his first ever Premier League game against the United team who just scored 6 on Thursday? I'm afraid it's going to have to be Fabinho. Sorry.
And they've got, obviously, at the top end of the pitch, Cavani, who, of course, won that free kick late on in the FA Cup. But
he won the free kick, correct. Yeah, he did win it, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Raise eyebrows for those who were just listening to the audio. But Lynchy, what about yourself for the back four?
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Ben Davis in the last couple of games just to sort of with this in mind and easing him in and giving him his Premier League debut. But the fact that hasn't happened, I think it's going to be Fabinho. And I don't think it's the right choice, but I just can't see the manager going with Ben Davis' Premier League debut at Old Trafford. I think it's, it probably puts too much pressure on the players. So as much as I'd like to probably see him in there as just to change things up, I think it's Fabinho alongside Kabak at centre half.
Well, as Doyle always says, this is where we pick our team. Don't pick the manager's team.
Yeah, well that's it. If it was me getting to pick the team, which would be a laugh.
Well, it is.
This is your card.
This is the whole point.
God, thank God I don't actually have to do it. I would pick Ben Davis.
Right,
there you go. He's in then, isn't he?
He's in.
Yeah.
Gorsey midfield.
Well, Fabinho's in there. I think Milner's been okay lately, actually. I worry about Thiago occasionally. I do think sometimes pace of the game takes him by surprise a little bit. I think we'll see the best of him next season when we've got a proper team. Wijnaldum and Milner.
Wijnaldum and Milner, nearly tongue twister there for me. But Doyle, your midfield?
Can you go on to Lynch while I have a bit of a think about this?
Yeah, okay, because you put Fabinho in.
Well,
so,
if it's my team then, and I'm putting Ben Davis in there, so obviously Fabinho's in central midfield. I think, I quite like to get James Milner in there for this one. I think it's a big game. And then it's between Wijnaldum and Thiago, and I think, again, the manager would go with Wijnaldum in that situation, but I think I just want him to have a week off and have a sleep and just chill out because of how much football he's played. So I'd probably put Thiago in there.
Where's Curtis Jones at the moment? Is he out
he's in my team. He's in my
in
team. Is where he is.
Yeah.
He's in my team.
That's where he is.
The problem is I've been trying to work out the formation because I'm very much now of the opinion that if the forwards aren't scoring, just don't play them. Right. So
Guardiola, eh?
I want to get Milner, Thiago, Jones, and Wijnaldum all in there. Right. I want them all in there. So I'm trying. Well, I don't know what kind of formation because Salah's got to play, but I'm not ruining the rest of the team, and I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with the other one up there. So there's at least 4 in midfield, and then come back to me for the forward line.
Who are your 4 in midfield again? Did you say?
Wijnaldum, Milner, Thiago, and Jones.
That's a lot of midfield.
Right. Yeah, that is St. Helens answer to Pep Guardiola trying to just work it around for the big game of the season. But Gorst, your forward 3 then?
It's a difficult one. It's who's been the worst, Firmino or Mane.
Or who's been the least worst?
Yeah, against me better judgment, I'm leaving Jota out. I'm going to go with Mane, Firmino, and Salah. Jota for the last 20 minutes or whatever.
Okay, Lynchy, yourself?
I think Gorsty's being conservative, like the manager would there.
That's not his. You're saying that's not his team?
It's of course that's Gorsty's team. Of course it is. I think I've said before that I think Firmino is just too crucial to pull out of there, particularly in big games where you want to keep the centre halves busy. So he starts. Mo Salah, you can't drop him. So it's just a choice on that left hand side. And I think again, if I'm going to drop Wijnaldum out of my team, then might as well give Mane a rest because he's played too much football as well, and I feel sorry for him. So maybe start with Jota.
Right. Okay, Doyle, you're not starting Origi up with Salah, are you?
No, he's injured. That's ridiculous. Come on, guy. Honestly, keep up to that. I know you've been off for 2 weeks, but you must know that, surely. The team. I've kind of worked it out in my head now, so let's try and put this into actual English words. Jurgen Klopp always says he hasn't got enough English words to describe certain things, and I'm struggling with my extensive vocabulary to decide what I'm going to do with this team. So I'm going to have in the midfield Milner and Wijnaldum. Milner and Wijnaldum will be whoever's the deepest. Curtis Jones is over, kind of off towards the left, right? Salah is on the right. Wijnaldum is kind of in between those two, and Firmino's up front. But
I thought Wijnaldum was holding in midfield with Milner.
Sorry, Thiago's the other one that he's played. Basically,
and who's through the middle?
So you've got Wijnaldum and Milner at the back, and you've got Firmino up top.
Right.
And then you've got 3 more players. Curtis Jones isn't so much on the left wing, but kind of leftish midfield. And then you've got Thiago in the centre, and then you've got Salah on the right.
Yeah, that's
so it's kind of a 4-2-3-1. But it's a team that will certainly, United will be thinking for the first 15 minutes, what on earth is going on? Where's Jurgen Klopp gone? Why is this bald guy in charge? What the hell is going on? Is he rating the players as this game's going on? Is he just trying to...
Is that what they do with the notepad? Brendan Rodgers is always scribbling it down. Right, match predictions. Let's get to that. Lynchy, you can kick us off. What's the score going to be?
Well, obviously, if you pick my team, they would win handily. But I think Jurgen's going to pick his team, and therefore, I think I don't hold that much hope for this. I think United are going to get a penalty and probably win 3-1.
Right. Okay. Gorsty?
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to say Liverpool are going to lose, but I think this might be one where they will. I think they'll put up a little bit of a fight, but I think they'll lose 2-1.
Come on, guys. Sheffield United won at Old Trafford. Liverpool can do it. Doyley?
Liverpool will win 3-2. I think United are, and I've said it I think they've been the biggest fraudulent team of this pandemic. And in terms of they've kind of been the positive to what Sheffield United have been the negative. Sheffield United have massively lost out through the no fans, and weirdly through the 3 subs rule as well. If they'd have been able to make more of that, then I think they'd have had a better chance of staying up. That's an irony there for you. But yeah, I do think that, on a serious point, I think United, while they did win 6-2, I think that kind of took a lot out of them. I think Liverpool will have prepared very well for this game. They got no excuse in that regard. I don't think Nat Phillips will be missed as much as he would have been against Leeds and Newcastle, provided Liverpool don't give away some stupid, United don't score a lot of headers from what I can recall. Even Harry Maguire doesn't score that many coming up. So as long as they can cut out those kind of daft set pieces, I think there's going to be a game where Liverpool's shots all go in. The last one was when they beat Palace 7-0, which was a bit ridiculous. I'm not saying Liverpool are going to beat United 7-0, but I think if they can get one where they get the noses ahead early on, I think United will think, well, hang on, we do want to win this, but we've got a big game coming up next week. We're a little bit tired. And it'll just all play in the mind. And I think Liverpool will win 3-2. So there.
From a hugely illogical team to a logical description as to why Liverpool are going to win.
Because absolutely everything this season has been fairly straightforward and has gone massively to plan, hasn't it? Yeah. Everybody expected everything.
Yeah.
So...
Very, very predictable season. We all knew how it was going to play out. Anyway, that's it from us for this edition of the Blood Red Podcast. Make sure you check out everything the Echo has to offer on Sunday around the game in the build-up and, of course, during the match as well. We'll be back on the YouTube channel with a debrief after the game, the post-game podcast on our audio-on-demand feeds. But from myself, Guy Clarke, Paul Gorst, Ian Doyle and David Lynch, thanks for your time and your company. It's bye for now.
This is the Blood Red Podcast from the